Welcome to the UNBC Forestry Club Podcast. This podcast is recorded at the Seaford radio station on campus from the traditional unceded territory of Chilcotin. You're probably listening from other places in BC or Canada or maybe around the world. We encourage you to recognize the traditional territory you get to learn, play, and live on. All right, welcome back, smart people. So today we have a very special episode because of Daniel Persson joined us. So he's a professional registered forester. He's the Forestry Superintendent for Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation, or people call him CCR. And I learned he's got lots of forestry experience working in Sweden and in BC. And I learned on the newest FBC magazine that he and CCR took on this challenge to harvest about 560 hectare fire damaged forest burned during the Elephant Hill fire from 2017, if I'm correct.
Yep.
So today we're honored and fortunate to have Daniel to join us to contrast the differences between Swedish Forestry and BC Forestry and discuss his post-fire harvest pilot project. So thank Daniel for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. I mean, I'm pretty excited to have this conversation. I've been listening to you guys' podcast as well.
Wow, that means a lot to us.
Yeah, I feel like I feel privileged. Like, I mean, I'm like you've invited John Brink, Liam Parfit, like some people that's done pretty cool stuff in the industry. Like that I'm part of it. That feels cool to me. I'm honored.
We're honored that you're listening to those, and that means a lot to us. We always wonder, you've had people actually listening to this, and obviously, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I just want to also take this opportunity to thank Jason Fisher from FestBC, that he was our forest policy professor, and he's the one connect me and Elise Clark, who is the communication and stakeholder engagement specialist from Amplify Consulting. So without those two very important people, this episode won't happen because I wouldn't even have this opportunity to contact you. So big shout out to Jason and Elise for helping us out. And so today we also have Ryan to join us. And Ryan's my friend also. Are you still a member for the Forestry Club?
Yeah.
You are? Okay.
Yeah.
Of
course.
We all graduating we're graduating in April. So, and also, one thing about today, why is it so special, is because this is our first episode of the UNBC Forestry Club podcast that was recorded outside of the UNBC campus.
Yeah.
So this is our first. So I just hope somebody can keep this podcast going after graduate, and then keep reaching out more professionals working in the industries or from different perspectives in forestry. All right, so Daniel, I'm probably going to hand the microphone. I've done enough talking. I'm going to hand the microphone to you. Can you please tell me a little bit, bring us back to how you get into forestry initially, and then start from maybe education, and then how you start working in Sweden forestry, and then eventually here. Who you are right now.
Why BC?
Yeah, why BC?
That's a long story. It's a long story, but I think it's a fairly good one. So, I am from a small northern community in Sweden. It's called Näsåker. And, that community, it probably only exists because of forestry. So I grew up in that town, and I had a really good childhood, and I grew up in a beautiful community. Like, I love that place. And a lot, the reason that place is so good is a lot because of forestry. So I'm a big promoter of forestry. Because and when I say forestry, I mean all spectrums of forest management. So that's my background, and like in that town too, all my friends, they were running logging trucks, harvesters, forwarders, you name it, planting trees, brush cutting, and so I kind of just became a part of that, and that was a privilege because because I love forestry.
Me too. We all love forestry here.
Yeah. So anyway, I started planting trees when I was 14 years old.
Oh wow.
I don't even think you're allowed to start start working before you're 15 in Sweden, but somehow my brothers were planting trees as well. They're old. All my brothers are older. I got 3 brothers. But I started planting when I was 14. I kind of just jumped into the bus with them.
Yeah.
And I was planting trees for 4 years. And that's my first kind of experience working within the forest industry. And my brothers, it was funny because we always competed who could plant the most trees in a day. And the person that planted the most trees could take the first shower when you get home.
Gotta get his first shower.
Yeah, exactly. No, and it was funny because, I was the youngest, so I always lost. So by the time I got to shower, it's cold water. So, but anyways. So it was still good. And I remember the first day planting too. It was between spruce and pine. And they told me to plant spruce in this one lower area. And I'm like, oh shit, what's the difference between a spruce and a pine? so I took a box of each, one a pine, one spruce, and then I'm like, it'll be close enough, 50-50.
Yeah.
And then I did get shit for planting both there, but at least, that was my first day working in the forest industry.
Right
So, and then after that, I graduated high school, and then I got my real job within forestry. I did natural science in high school, and then I got into the real world, and I was a brush cutter and a faller for a smaller company in Sweden. That was very labor intense. Like,
I bet.
Yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener. I'm like, shit, is this my life now? Like, forestry was the wrong choice.
Yeah, I think we've all had that moment.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So anyway, the I did that for a year and a half full time, and but then I'm like, you know what? We had some incidents actually too, and that's also another reason why I'm like, well, you know what? I don't want to do this because the reason, like, it's pretty high risk, like, especially as a faller. Like, my boss at the time had a big incident, hurt himself pretty bad falling, and I worked for 2 companies actually. And my other boss, he's a hell of a character. He's like 65 when we did that, and he's the hardest worker on the site. Mm-hmm. And I do look up to him today, but he was crazy. Like, at the time, he didn't allow me to wear my earmuffs because I had to hear the RPMs of the saw.
Wow.
He's like an old school forester.
Yeah, it's tough.
Oh yeah, but he's crazy. But he's a good guy off the work site, but on the work site he's like something else. Yeah. Anyway, this one day he broke his leg too, and instead of letting us know that he broke his leg, he crawled himself out to the bush so that he didn't lose production on the works.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, that's the type of character he was, and but you know, it says something about hard work. It builds a character.
For sure.
Yeah.
I did some falling in Alberta for fall and burn.
Oh yeah.
Same thing. People just got cuts everywhere. People just hire them as piecework too. It's -40. You still want to go out and work, and because you don't work, you don't get paid.
Yeah, that's just it. So anyway, I kind of felt it wasn't for me, although I did enjoy it, but I felt like I can't do this for like all my life. It's not feasible because, well, it wears on you.
Yeah.
So I applied to the Swedish the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. So SLU, it's called.
Right.
And to become a Jägermeister. That's the title. It's a master's of the forest science.
Okay.
And my well, it was a pretty high, like, to get in there it's pretty competitive. Mm-hmm. And I didn't make the cut. And then I'm like, fuck, I dropped an F-bomb. I'm sorry.
That's fine. It's fine.
Okay, yeah.
I got lots of ways to do it. Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I guess I'll have to work another year. So I went back to work. I did the brush cutting and all that. And I remember I was having lunch and I was checking my email. And the university reached out to me. They're like, well, and this is like half a month into the first year, and they're like, if you can make it here within 2 days, we'll take you on because we've had some dropouts. And I'm like, oh shit! I just like, well, I dropped another one, so I just said, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And then I just quit on the spot. At lunch, I'm like, I got to do this. I took my mom and dad's vehicle and I drove up to Umeå in Sweden.
Right.
And I started my university. Started as a student to become a Jägermeister in that town. And I remember the first day because I was so unprepared. Like I've already dropped. I was thinking it's like, oh, it's that boat sailed. Like I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
But then I did make it, and then I just went there with the clothes I had on, and I showed up to the first day for me at the lecture there, and I meet the professor, and he's like where's your? He looked at me, and you could tell like he was disappointed because it was like
All my professors.
And mine too.
Exactly. He's like, "Where's your pen and where's your notebook?" I'm like, I just got here. But anyway, like I kind of worked through it, and I really enjoyed my time as a student. It's a time where you can, really question and learn a lot. So I did, I believe I did. My grades doesn't reflect that, but yeah, I had a really good time, and I learned a lot too. And during that time too, in the summer, one major company in Sweden did hire me as a forest planner, and also I was supervising and monitoring silviculture activities. So it's called SCA, one of the biggest landowners in Sweden too, actually. So that's where I got a lot of the experience being a forest planner in Sweden. Also when it comes to silviculture activities such as spacing, commercial thinning, what else? Planting. I was doing planting supervision.
It was like a full-face forestry, basically, hey?
Yeah, they did expose me to a lot of things because they were grooming me to hire me directly once I graduated university. That was their plan, and they were very honest. That was a really good company to work for as well. Anyway, I was doing the university thing, and it was going really well. I met my wife there as well. My current wife, she also lives here. She's also a forester.
Nice.
Yeah, Jägermeister, yeah. So anyway, her dream was to come to BC. And
was she exposed to BC before that? Never?
Never. She wanted to be an exchange student and go to UBC actually.
Okay.
But she never had the opportunity to do that. So she's like, well, you know what? After I graduate, I want to go to Canada or to BC and just experience the forestry there. And it's like, I don't want to do that. but I was thinking about it for a while, and then, you know what? I wanted to see the States as well.
Yeah.
And while we were kind of coming into, I just graduated, and we were kind of coming into the 2-year hump in a relationship. Or do you guys have a girlfriend or anything?
2 years, 7 year, and then what's the next?
Yeah, I have a fiance. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the 2-year hump anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, is this gonna work out? And I was thinking, well, maybe I'll test the relationship. So I told her, I was like, I'll come with you to BC, but we'll have to travel through the States. We're like, well, we don't have any money to travel through the States, so how are we gonna do that? Well, we'll just buy a pedal bike.
Oh wow!
And then because one of my friends, have you guys seen the movie Arthur? Or it's like this dog.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. So he's an adventurer, so he recommended this trail, the Continental Divide mountain bike trail.
You did that trail?
I did.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
What?
With my wife.
Shout out to Bailey. My friend Bailey, she did that multiple times, and she's a huge hiker.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
She hikes like 60 kilometers in a day.
Oh.
She's
Well, we barely did that on bike.
she always say that, you know, she's not built for school, always get, you know, bet marks and whatnot, but she's an amazing hiker.
Wow.
Very inspiring. So shout out to Bailey if you're listening. Anyway.
That is cool. I'll look into that.
Yeah.
But so my wife kind of agreed to that. We'll do the thing, and I've never pedaled bike a day in my life.
Yeah.
Like it was completely new to me, and I was a bigger dude at the time. Like I was probably 225, and so we went to the border of Mexico, or in Columbus there, where you start the trail, and bought bikes, and we started the bike trip. And
awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like I think it's 4,500 kilometers of mostly single track trail. So we did that, and you know what? I'm best thing ever. So yeah, I was a big guy. If you have problems with your relationship and you're slightly overweight, go on a 4,500 kilometer bike ride.
It sounds like me. All right.
Yeah, because like it was challenging for sure for everything, but you only have each other, so you kind of figure everything out. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have any money, so we took our time, but we stayed 68 nights or days in a tent.
That's wild.
To do that trip, but we climbed mountains, we explored Colorado, Yellowstone, all that stuff. Like it was amazing. And say what you want about the Americans, but man, they're friendly people, and they're very inviting. Especially if you show up on a bike.
Yeah.
Being a Swede. Yeah.
Because I remember that trail goes all the way into Canada a little
Bam.
bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Was that how you get into Canada?
Yeah.
Was actually?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, well, that bike trip, there's so many stories, and I'll actually listed just a couple there, but one night, talk a bit about the friendliness of the Americans. One night we were staying at this, like in the bush, middle of nowhere.
Right.
And there was only this 4x4 trail to get in there. Mm-hmm. And this guy, like I think it was 2 a.m. at night, like he woke us up in the tent. And my wife was like, who's showing up at 2 a.m.? We're going to get killed out here. And I get out of the tent, and I like meet this guy that stopped with his truck, and he's like, hey, you guys want to shoot some guns? I'm like, heck yeah.
Of course.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, there's like pitch black outside, and he brought his like AR-15s, like pistols, everything, and we're just blasting into the bush there, like craziest experience of my life. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, yeah, you basically packed up and left. And we're like, wow, what just happened? But that was awesome.
Just spend some time to hang out with you, shoot some guns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so a lot of weird things like that. Actually, like I was got charged by a bear, and also because like I started the bike trip weighing 225. By the time we were done, I was 175.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was pretty skinny, actually.
What's 225 ounces?
50 pounds.
50 pounds.
Yeah.
I need to do that.
Yeah, almost
I need to do that.
It was not bad. Well, because you carry the weight of the food, so then you're like, it's not worth it. the time I got charged by that bear too is because I ate a little pouch of tuna. I was just dying for food.
Right.
And then I knew people were like, oh, there's bears in there. And I'm like, that's silly. So I ate this pouch of tuna. And it was also pitch black outside, middle of the bush. And I was just going to go for a piss. And then I hear this bear charging me couldn't even see my hand in front of me.
Yeah.
But I knew like that thing was close.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like half walked back and made noise back to my now wife, and I said, I'm pretty sure there's a bear there. She's like, no, you're just being silly. And then I started to question myself, okay, maybe it's not a bear. I brought a flashlight and then we walked back. and we walked back to the site. That's Phil. He's a great forester as well. But anyway, so we walked back to that area, and sure enough, it was a bear. And this time we had a flashlight.
What bear? Black
bear.
Okay.
And he charged us again. And then my wife just went running. And I'm like, I told you it was a bear. And then, yeah, it was fine. Like, he just charged 2 times and then he took off. But we definitely didn't sleep very well that night because we just had camp like 50 meters away from there.
That's wild.
Yeah, and then cougar following us too. We were biking like late that night to just get to the campsite. And all of a sudden this cougar was following us and we're going uphill and we're like trying to pedal and this cougar was just slowly walking with us. I'm like, fuck, we're gonna die. But we never did. And like we learned a lot from that trip. Like,
have you talked to your wife about this trip? The purpose of was about the testing this. Does she know this?
She's gonna hear it on the podcast.
Yeah, she's gonna learn this from this. And we just don't want to be part of that.
Should we cut it?
Yeah, is it? Does she know?
Well, it was definitely a test of the relationship. She knows. She probably doesn't know that actually, but at the time, I'm sure she felt the same way.
Right.
And I bet you we broke up 10 times during the trip. But because you only have each other and you're stuck with the bike, and I'm carrying the tent and she's carrying the sleeping bag, so it's like, okay, we'll be friends by the end of the day so that we can sleep.
That's the trick. You got to be really remote, just you and your girlfriend. So if things go south, she still have to stick with you.
Exactly.
No choice. Yeah.
No choice.
Yeah.
So that's how it goes.
Sorry. Yeah. So anyway, it's. It was great. I think we learned a lot about each other because you're just so exposed, but at the same time you like got each other to kind of lean on. So it was good, and that I'm sure that built the foundation of what we have today. Like we have 3 kids together, and
Congrats.
Beautiful family.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it is great. So I'm happy with that. I made the right choice. The bike trip was also the right choice because I did test the relationship. It worked out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you get into BC forestry?
Well,
you came into North America, started in the States. How do you land in BC?
So,
and what was your first job?
It's so we got into the BC. Okay, we biked up to Banff. And then we've already applied for this working holiday visa. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to get a job in BC. Mm-hmm. So then we actually started to hitchhike from Banff to get into more central BC to get a job. So we hitchhiked with an RV to go to Princeton, of all the places. And then we started to apply for jobs. And honestly, I was listening to the Brink podcast, and he's like, when I got to Canada, I had $25 and something cents.
$25.47.
Exactly.
2 books, suitcase, and a couple shirts. I still remember.
Yeah.
John Brink. Shout out to John Brink.
Yeah, and I listened to that. I'm like, man, I can really relate to that because when we got to Princeton there, I remember counting my bank account balance between the 2 of us. I'm like, okay, we got $900. If we spend an average of whatever, $75 a day, that leaves us 11 days to get a job, to figure our lives out. And we're like, okay, because at that time, like if we 11 days, 0 in the bank account. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, but like I said, I grew up in a good place. My wife did too. What would have happened there? It's not like we would have just called our parents and like, hey, can you buy a flight ticket home? And we'll come home. But anyway, we started applying for jobs, anything, like just to get through the door. We were desperate, and then this consulting company did reach out to it was to myself, and he was wondering if we're interested in this camp work. I'm like, sounds good. Like, okay, it's like, oh yeah, you'll be 7 on and 3 off. I'm like, no. I wanted to be 100% on.
Never off.
Yeah, exactly. So he agreed to that, and then we got free food, and we got a place to live, and because we were still in the tent.
Was it a planting job?
No, it was a layout and
Cruising?
yeah, cruising. All the layout faces basically in Big White, Kelowna, steep country.
Oh,
And
wow.
lots of species. There was I think it was a really steep learning curve for me, coming from Sweden with all new species. Everything is new to me. I didn't understand why we were doing cruising because I'm like, this makes no sense. But now I do. Well, to a degree. I've done tons of cruising. But anyway, so I did that, ran D-lines for like, I think we gotten paid $15 an hour.
Oh, so cable block.
Yeah, lots
Wow.
of cable blocks. And
That's wild.
it was wild. We only did it for a month, but at least we worked a lot, like freaking 12-hour days every day for a month.
Nice.
It gave us a buffer in the bank account, and all of a sudden we can breathe a little bit. And then another constant, well, because during those 11 days, so we started applying for jobs. I think it was August 27th. And I was like, okay, by September 11th, we need to have a job. And I think we got the job on September 6th.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it worked out. And anyway, kind of lost track a little bit. But anyway, we sent every day. We're like, okay, we're going to average to send our resume out to 30 employers every day. During the time we did that, because we're just like, quantity over quality. And then another company that we sent their resume out saw that, okay, well, I have some commercial thinning experience. And then the Constance Management here in Williams Lake reached out to myself and said, well, are you interested in this project? They're going to start up a commercial thinning project with West Fraser. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Because there was more the scope of work that I wanted to get into, coming to BC as well. And we came in and we saw like the slash piles, we saw forest management in BC, and it's just like coming from Sweden, it's like, holy moly, this is barbaric. Like, why are we just cutting for saw logs and we're cutting the gold, leaving the silver kind of thing. And we're just throwing a match at it. So that was mind-blowing to me, coming from Sweden. And I just could not understand, like, why are we managing the forests the way we are managing our forests in BC? Just, like, I understand it better now, and we'll get to that further down into this podcast, but that's, like, also, that was the excitement with BC. Like, me coming from Sweden, I think I brought a perspective, and I got the feeling with BC, it's like, wow, I can really make a difference in this province. Like, because there's so much, like, forestry in BC is fairly new still.
Very new.
Yeah, exactly.
Compared to European forestry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was the one thing I didn't like with Swedish forestry. I felt boxed in, framed in, because everything is so like, oh, at this stage you do this, at that stage you do that. You don't have to think, you just have to do. And I think that was really what like caught my interest with BC forestry. Like I said, before our trip, I didn't think much of it, BC at all.
Yeah.
But then when I got here and I got to see it, like in the cowboy way of doing forestry here.
That's the great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeehaw!
Yeah.
That's all you need.
But I loved it. But also, I also loved it because there's room for improvement. And I can help in a way that I would never be able to in Sweden. So so that's kind of a brief way of how we got into BC Forestry. And then we ended up here in Williams Lake, and I got tons of experience with Consus. Like, they have a great team of professionals that taught me the ins and outs of the tenure system, different management practices and FSP, everything within the caribou. I think the caribou is where I'm most familiar. And then after that, after 5 years, I worked actually with some biomass systems and bioenergy burners up in Fort McPherson as well. And that was a crazy experience. I learned tons. And after that, FP Innovations reached out and asked if I was interested in this in this role as a researcher to research commercial thinning and also intensive forest management, but also processor optimization and accuracy. So I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. So I did that for 2 years, learned a ton as well. I worked with some really good people. But then after 2 years, they reached out from this office. Phil, actually, that was just outside the door there, reached out and asked if I was interested in this pretty unique opportunity with CCR, representing, it was 2 communities, First Nation communities at the time. We have 3 First Nation communities that own CCR right now, and be part of leading the forest management in the Chilcotin region. And that really hit home for me, because I think BC, and one of the issues I see with BC is it lacks ownership. By working for the First Nation communities out in Chilcotin, they have a true sense of ownership to the forest. They really care. And for me, perfect opportunity to actually start doing some real forest management in BC, not only resource extraction. So that's how I got into CCR, and I'm really privileged with CCR too, how they're giving me the trust to explore all these new projects we're doing. Well, obviously I'm not doing everything myself. We have a big team of professionals. Like Phil is one of them, Percy, you just met, Chief Lennon, Chief Joe, Chief Otis. It's a big umbrella of professionals working with CCR, and I'm just pumped to be part of it. So that's kind of how I got into CCR.
Awesome. Yeah. I like the distinction you just made there about how it feels like it's more about forest management and less about resource extraction.
Yeah.
And that's a good point you made too about the ownership.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you live and work in the community where you're, where you are harvesting the timber, you're gonna care a little more about it, I feel.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And that's like I did prepare a little bit for this podcast, and
Appreciate that.
And that was one of the main things I see the difference between Swedish Forestry and BC Forestry. So let's say like you both said that you've been doing some layout and planning.
Mm-hmm.
So who did you do it for?
So I currently work for Spectrum Resource Group.
Oh, okay, like a
And
consulting company.
Consulting company,
Yeah.
and I've done work for Canfor, Dunkley, Tolko, a couple different licensees.
Yeah.
Done some work in Saskatchewan even actually. Yeah.
And you just kind of proved my point there a little bit. So you just listed the clients, there's lots of sawmills, lots of licensees. They own sawmills. They have zero ownership in the land. But still, they are the ones doing the forest management, if you can call it, on the landscape. And there's a disconnect there, because there's no incentive for them to invest in the land. They have to, and I don't blame them. They have their sawmills, and they have a business to run. So that business plan is over 20 years, whatever it is, but they will have to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
And that is by harvesting trees. But I think that just creates a disconnect of why we have the forest we have today, is because there's a bit of disconnect there with actually owning the forest. Because if you own the forest, if you live on the land where you do the harvesting, where you do the planting, you will have a different care. And that I really see, like, it's awesome the way forestry in BC is going with First Nations, because it's not there's no better owner of the forests. I think they have a level of care that in BC that nobody else would have. So that I'm really excited about that, and that was obviously a reason why I joined CCR as well. So that is a main difference. Like, so the ownership structure in Sweden is I think it's 80% privately owned, and the other portion is either owned by the church or the state. So I think it's just about half is owned by very small private forest owners.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it also gives a big diversity of owners, and they'll manage the forest differently. But yeah, that's the difference. So in Sweden, we invest to our forests. In BC, we make sure our obligations are met, not the investment.
We definitely want to dive into the Swedish Forestry and BC, the contrast between these two.
Definitely.
But before that, I just have two questions. Maybe one comment and one questions is, I think a lot of people, either you're in the forestry world or you're not, there are a lot of First Nation engagements in BC forestry, and there are a lot of like First Nation owned, First Nation woodlot license, their First Nation owned forest license, and if you watch the news, listen to any kind of like debates in forestry, you can always hear when people thinking about forestry, they automatic default to First Nation, that they just don't want any type of logging or any type of timber harvesting on their land base. It's true, but it also First Nations that's, don't want to use the word, is supporting this kind of activities, and then we're being part of it. I can name just over a dozen First Nation owned logging company, forestry planning companies, communities that kind of heavily rely on forestry, but people simply just do not know. So I just wanted to comment that First Nations is heavily, involved in BC forestry in many different layers, from beginning to end.
No, and my take on that too is, it's actually, I like the fact that the different First Nation communities and governments, they look at forestry differently. Yeah. Because that will give a diversity in forest management. Mm-hmm. So I'm not opposed to that. Like, I work with 3 communities, Unesatine, Seidaldal, and Klotinko, that they're all very positive to forest management. They see the benefits of it. Mm-hmm. They're all remote communities, and honestly, the main industry or the main work opportunity for a normal family in those communities are forestry. And that is a big role with CCR, to provide that employment, to make sure that those communities function. Because let's say we do harvesting, let's say we do spacing, planting, whatever it is, that work is provided to the communities. And then the money that's given out to the people that work within forestry in those communities, that money is used to restaurants, roads, hotels, everything. Yeah. Exactly. It's a trickle-down effect. And it's more a local economy instead of money just flowing straight out of the towns. Yeah. And that reminds me a lot of the town I come from. Yeah. And something where I want us to move to as well. And that is a big difference as well. The public perception of forestry in Sweden is very positive to forest management, even logging, commercial thinning, you name it, planting, space. Like it's such a broad scope. Like foresters, frick, we deal with everything.
Everything.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's a big difference. I think with the management we've had here in BC for the last 30 years, it's kind of given a negative public perception towards forestry, and I think it's also because we haven't shown the true possibilities or opportunities that come with true forest management. So.
So I know a little bit about BC Forestry, or most likely in the Omnica region, or just north of the Caribou region. So BC Forestry is public owned. 95% of the land is public owned, and then let's say BC is 100 hectares big, then half of it is forested, and then half of that is timber harvest land based. And the industrial forestry up there pretty much started after the Second World War, the 1950s. So it's really young in comparison to Europe. And, we've been going through some of the phases. We initially start with IU lock, or high grading, taking on the big trees, and then going to the clear cuts, and then going to clear cut with reserve, and then going into now trying to diversify our silviculture prescriptions. So, I'm just curious about when the Swedish forestry started. Like, is there any primary forest or natural forest exist in Sweden?
Well, I think most of Sweden's forests have been managed or cut to some degree. So that is something like I'm not all positive to Swedish forestry, and that's a flaw. Back then, we didn't really know about the values of old growth or values of conserving forests. So there's very little area that's been conserved in Sweden. I think it's roughly maybe 10%. Everything else has been managed at some point. And Swedish forestry started, like when it really became more of an industry, is around early 1900s, 1912.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's actually really cool. It's yeah. Anyway, so that's one thing. So Sweden's forests are very uniform, very single layer pine, spruce. It's not lodgepole pine, but there's some lodgepole pine. But
The lodgepole pine growing there?
well, it comes from BC because there's a Swede. I think maybe 20 years ago, he came to BC before the mountain pine beetle, and he's looking at the lodgepole pine, and he's like, "This is an awesome tree species that we should introduce to Sweden." And they introduced maybe it's probably less than it's the single percentage, maybe less than 5%. That consists of lodgepole pine. It's all planted and it originated from BC.
Yeah.
Exists in Sweden, but anyway, more like 40%. Of the stands are Norwegian spruce. Mm-hmm. The other 40 is Scots pine, Scots pine.
Okay.
I think it's called. So there's basically two very distinct forest types in Sweden, and it's those two.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's some deciduous forests as well, but it's I think it's maybe 14% or something like that. Yeah.
That's what the plantation is. Do you have any? We get all this criticism from monoculture, right? Either plant pine or plant spruce, or you do A2 mix, or is it the same for Swedish plantation?
It's very similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's it's either pine or spruce.
What's the climate looks like? Because I heard.
It's
Because you know what's funny about BC Forestry is everybody from the government people, from scholars, from academia, we all go to Sweden to learn how Swedish people do forestry.
Yeah.
So I always just have this big questions. What's so special about Sweden, forestry in Sweden or Finland? And people just all go there, and it seems like that's where the cutting edge. That's the best forestry.
Come back and they're like, this is what we need to do. This is what they've been doing. This is
So is BC Forest even similar to?
It is very similar.
Oh, cool.
It is and it isn't. I'm going to say that. But so I think we So, well, we have spruce and pine. We have spruce and pine here. They're all somewhat similar in their characteristics and how they grow and all that. So,
Right.
lodgepole pine is a little different, but overall, it's very similar. Same climate, similar site indexes, depending on where you are in Sweden, depending on where you are in BC, but very similar. I think one thing that kind of made Sweden as the golden child of forestry, I guess, is also the investment. Like they went from, I think it's maybe 50 million cubic meters per year in harvests back in the mid 50s sustainably, but through genetically enhancing seedlings, they've been able to increase their sustainable cut with like 120% over 100 years.
Oh, wow.
That's insane, right?
Yeah.
It's insane.
That's impressive. Yeah.
It's really impressive. So I think a lot of people go to Sweden. It's like, oh, we should do more commercial thinning. We should do more of everything else. But they miss the fact that the biggest factor to why we've increased that timber supply or fiber supply is because we've enhanced the seedling genetics over generations and generations and generations with orchards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's growing really well. And also another thing that people don't talk about is the ditching. Like Sweden's tons of wetlands.
Yeah.
And we ditched a lot of the wetlands back then to turn non-productive forest lands to productive forest lands. But yeah.
Yeah, that sounds spicy.
Yeah, it's nothing we do anymore, but there was lots of that back in historically. So.
And then you mentioned when you first got to PC, you saw those like slash piles.
Yeah.
And then you were shocked.
Yeah.
So I guess that wasn't a thing in Sweden then?
No.
No slash piles?
No slash piles, but all harvesting. I've never seen a buncher or a skidder or a processor for that matter until I got to probably the States or BC. So everything is harvested with harvesters forwarders. And so yeah, it's all taken to roadside, and all the fiber that's taken to roadside is utilized. Even the tops and the branches, like they process it in the forest. So I think it's like 35% of the area is also being drug out with the forwarder to grind into bioenergy plants. So very high utilization compared to BC. And one of the main reasons is the pillars of the industry. So here we have the mega sawmills.
Yeah.
Massive sawmills.
Super mill.
Super mills, yeah.
And in Sweden we have the super pulp mills. Yeah, like the two largest pulp mills in the world, Sweden and Finland.
Okay.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so like we are in the mega pulp industry there, and saw logs. We do lumber as well. Obviously, lumber is high. Like it's what do you call it? It's a good product. You make money on lumber too. But the that's just the cream of the crop. So how we manage forest, and that's a big difference that a lot of people don't look at when they come to Sweden, and why we do commercial thinning the way we do it is because we have such a strong pulp industry. So commercial thinning, like majority of the fiber that's utilized from a commercial thinning, pulp.
Right.
So how can we do tons of commercial thinning in BC if we don't have a strong pulp industry? But now we're changing, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, we have a big demand for saw logs, but we're all seeing it. The timber supply isn't there. So the saw log mega sawmills, they have to adjust to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen when that happens? When it's already happening, there's going to be a shortage of pulp, and then they will have to look at alternatives. And then at that point, we can start doing commercial thinning to start harvesting for pulp, to start feeding the pulp mill. So I think pulp industry in BC might hopefully rise a little bit now if we harvest less for solids. And then pulp, because it uses a wider it's a wider niche.
Mm-hmm.
It uses more of the tree. All of a sudden you can do more. So that's a big reason why we manage the forest the way we do in Sweden. Because juvenile wood as well, I think it has a higher lignin content.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really good for pulp. And spruce, juvenile spruce, and the Norwegian spruce, like perfect for pulp. So that's why Sweden is very, very strong in the pulp world. That's why we have freaking Swedish toilet paper in the toilets here in BC. And every time I see it, like going to restaurants and stuff, it pisses me off, because why aren't we
doing that?
Exactly.
Because we talked to a lot of foresters, and then we always ask them, hey, there's one policy or one thing you can do in BC that can change our practices and make it better. And then I heard a lot of, we need investment in cutting edge pulp manufacturing or industry.
Yeah.
We need a really high efficient pulp factory, basically.
We do.
Now I understand why, because commercial thinning is coming.
Yeah.
Like we can't cut primary forest forever.
No.
Commercial thing, they're gonna get, we at some point we need to take care of those plantation that we did 50 years ago.
Same thing if we want to manage for wildfire risk, we want to manage like for all those things, pulp has a big role to play. If we want to do it, I think on a larger scale, work with the industry, go further. Otherwise, we will never be able to address the wildfire risk on the landscape to the scale we need to address it. We need to work with industry to do what we want to do the right forest management. If you work against the industry, you're going to just work in your little bubble and barely get anything done. And that's the beauty with a strong forest industry. If it's aligned with forest management, because then you can really get shit done.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why a lot of people look up to Swedish Forestry, because the management aligns with the industry.
That's really cool. So
that's a great perspective. Yeah.
That's a great. So Swedish ecosystem is it more towards like interior BC or is it coastal BC, or
Sorry, what was that?
like Swedish like ecosystem or the environment?
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
it-
So
Is it
I think horsefly. Well, maybe. So it's not as dry. It's a little more wet. So leaving the branches in the bush after logging, like you do the let's say commercial thinning. You
right?
do the processing in the bush. Tops, branches get left in the bush.
Yeah.
Some of the dry types, Beck zones or geotypes here in BC, maybe that's not ideal.
Right.
So I still think like skidders and bunchers and processor have a role to play. And then other areas, let's say horsefly, where it's wetter, we can leave the branches in the bush. Like I know Liam Parfit,
Shout out to Liam.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's like there's no silver bullet. I said that before,
Yeah.
and I say it again. Site specific.
Yeah.
That's where true forest management comes in. You got to look at what you're dealing with. Like one thing applies here, the other thing might not apply at all in the other site. So looking at it and dealing what you have on the ground and use common sense goes a long ways.
We actually have Dr. Che Alkin from UNBC. He's got a big ask trial happening on John Prince Research Forest. And so Liam Parfit harvested all those, and then using the completely European model, using the harvester and folder, leaving all the fine fuel at the stump, and then because it's a really dry ecosystem, is SBS DW3, I believe. So there are a lot of the first criticism that jump out is what about the fire hazard, right? Because leaving the fine fuel. So they're studying those fine fuel moisture contents, not just in the fuel but also in the soil. Once they open it up, they studying so it's ongoing right now.
Well, that's good. Well, obviously there's tons of research that's needed there,
Yeah.
so that we can make a good informed decision on how to manage fuel loading and use the different, I guess, harvesting strategies. But it's like any forester, you have it's like we're basically construction contractors. You got to have the big tool belt, and you use the tool that makes the most sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So
In talking about the ecology, compare and contrast between Swedish Forestry and BC Forestry, I imagine disturbance events are pretty similar then, because you said it's a very similar forest type, right? Do you guys experience similar wildfire, similar wind disturbance, similar insect disturbance like we've seen in BC recently?
no, we actually don't
Okay.
at all. So because the way we manage forests with commercial thinning, and commercial thinning is a way to mimic the self-mortality in a stand when it grows dense. Because obviously trees compete and some die because of the competition, but once you thin it, you get very little mortality, very little fuel loading on the ground. So the fires because all forests in Sweden are uniform. So the fires we have, ground fires, very small in scale, because the fuel loading is not at all the same beast we're dealing with as in here in BC, where we have multi-layered stands, like dead wood everywhere. The amount of like mountain pine beetle, well, there's several factors why we have so much dead wood, but yeah, it's definitely a beast that we'll have to probably tackle for the rest of our lives working in BC. So
Totally. A couple more questions about Swedish forestry. It's just so interesting. So, you know, in BC, we have this very complex forestry cycle. You know, most people don't even know we started from planning. You have to go through the First Nation consultation, public referral, and then you go through the field work, which is the layout, the cruising, and then come back, develop a site plan, give the permanent team, get the cutting permit. Now you go in, harvest it, following all the rules, and then you plant that afterwards, and then you take care of the block after 20 years, declare free to grow, give the block back to the government.
yeah,
Is it the same for the Swedish forestry cycle?
No, not at all.
Oh, wow.
So well, we have the sawmills. I'm going to start back up a few steps. We have the sawmills in Sweden. The First Nations in Sweden, they're reindeer herders. Really, really cool lifestyle. They follow reindeer herds from winter grounds to summer grounds, and they travel across northern Sweden. And we do consultation with the Sami villages, and I mean, I know there's an ongoing debate if it's enough or if it's not, but anyway, the consultation, all you need to do is have record that you've had conversation with the Sami villages and that they're okay with your management strategies.
Right.
You submit a harvest notification. You just notify the government, it is the government in Sweden. I'm gonna go ahead and harvest my block here. Thumbs up within like 2-3 days.
What?
Yeah.
Up here we get in permit within 3 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Take 2-3 years to get a permit.
Yeah, like on average, a year and a half. It's insane. Like, and no doubt we have like high delivered log costs in BC because there's so many processes, and we make it so labor intense. Like, it makes, from my Swedish perspective, like I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of people not agreeing with me, and that's fine. But from my Swedish perspective, I think it's very bureaucratic. We're just chasing our own tail, and we'll have the same outcome.
Yeah.
So me as a forester, I go to a block, and it's like, okay, I walk through the block, within 1 hour, I know what type of treatment I want to do. But then I have to go through freaking 1 year of assessments and making sure, checking boxes that everything is good. And then we get and then consultation. Consultation as well is very time consuming. And then we do our own referrals, and then the government does their own referral to make sure everything's good. And then like after, Rick, who knows how long, you might get a cutting permit. But at that point, we've already dropped $200,000. Who knows? A lot of money to develop that cutting permit.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are we doing? And then cruising is another one. Like it did blow my mind. It's like, why are we cruising it? It's running through the scale anyway. But like I understand, like the government needs to set stumpage to assess the value of the fiber that's there. But there's got to be a better way. Like there's so much technology out there. Same thing like falling corners. Have you heard of falling corners?
Yep.
Seen some ribbons out in the bush, yeah.
Why do we do falling corners? Like I don't think a single logger looked at a fall. Well, in today's time, with GPS technology and everything, it's like I think we're chasing our tail. Let's move forward.
I've asked that same question about fallen corners and even boundary stations and stuff. I understand the importance of it, right? It's for auditing. It's for making sure that dotted our T's and crossed our I's, right?
Yeah.
How about you explain for those people that doesn't know what falling corner is and what is falling corner? Why is it?
As I understand, it's essentially a station, right? And you take a tree, and then typically it is for a fallen corner, you'd want it to be a merch tree anyways, because you want it to be big enough to be seen, and you hatch it into it and spray paint it and sometimes you add a metal clip to it, sometimes you just tie ribbon, but essentially it's just a waypoint, a station in the forest to keep people on track so they don't typically it's, as I understand it, to prevent trespasses.
It's like it basically dates back to paper maps. It's a year-referenced location where you can start doing your compass and shoot your bearing and then measure from there.
It all starts from way back when GPS was big and expensive.
Yeah.
So not everybody has GPS. So the one guy will go lay out the boundary, either using paint or ribbons, and somebody have to come back and traverse the boundary. Then it's when you set up your hatch mark, and then because GPS is expensive back in the days. It's not just something that on your phone you just go and cheap and so what else in this forestry cycle that's different? If we're thinking about the differences between the Swedish forestry cycle and the BC forestry cycle.
Well, I've already gotten in a little bit on the who leads the planning in BC. It's the sawmills.
Yeah.
In Sweden, the person leading all the planning is the owner of the forest, not the industry, the landowner. So that I think that is a big difference because you look at stuff from a different lens. But then like the typical forestry in Sweden, like say let's do the cycle. So you go in. So first of all, the normal landowner have a forest management plan. We don't follow an FSP. So every forest landowner needs a forest management plan. I'm pretty sure it's legislated. So you need to have a plan for if you own forests, you need to map it out. Like you know the different areas you have, and you kind of have a rough plan of how you're gonna treat the different stand types. And I did listen to Jason Fisher's podcast where it's like, where he said Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. But
shout out to Jason.
I agree with that. But at the same time, if you have a plan, it's easier to correct or realign if you have a plan that originated in the background, instead of just like scrambling and you have no clue what you're doing, what you don't know what's up, left, and down. So that's the big difference between the forest management plan. We manage something that we have field confirmed, it's real, and forest stewardship plans. Here in BC, all licensees need an FSP.
Yeah.
So that is the basically the theoretical management of forests in BC. But it doesn't. So we check all these boxes, whether we need to or not, whether they apply or not, for all areas, because we abide by the FSP. And the FSP, and then we have the AAC,
Yeah.
which is volume-based tenure,
Yeah.
which is basically a number taken from thin air. Like they will tell you can harvest 1,000 cubic meters out of this block that has 100 cubic meters in it. Like, it maybe not like that, but the AAC is, I don't get it. Like what?
It's a great number to have, but you really need to look into how they derived that number.
Yeah,
And what
exactly.
they're basing it on. Yeah.
Exactly.
And not just industry is talking about AAC, but a lot of from the conservation side of things, to talk about AAC as well, because it's spelled out by models, and then those models, is it actually representing, because nobody's cutting our AAC right now. Let's just be real. We all just undercut our AAC, and
Exactly.
is actually truly represent our annual ball cut. Yeah.
Sorry, I think we maybe skipped over it, but just for those who don't know, the AAC is the annual allowable cut.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much we're allowed to take in a given area, or even as a province, for the year would be your annual allowable cut. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no AAC in Sweden.
Well, you follow your forest management plan. You do what makes sense on your plan in your area. So there's no real AAC, but we have the forest management law, which has some pretty broad parameters of how to do forest management. So you can't just blade the forest down.
Go cowboy with it.
Yeah, exactly. There's some rules to it, but it's very flexible. And I think flexibility is key for true forest management as well. While the FSP is boxing me in a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it applies to everything. And at the same time, there's loopholes everywhere. So it doesn't reflect what's on the ground.
And I thank you for sharing that. And then for anybody that's listening right now, if you disagree or you agree, forestry is a very diverse field.
Yeah.
It's a crown land, so everybody has a say for what's happening on the crown land. And everybody depends on where you're coming from, what's your perspectives. Everybody's biased in a way. So we're talking about a forest industry here, forest management, and there obviously people's not going to agree with you. And I just hope we can still create a platform or environments for people to freely express. Right? This is your stage, and then you can say whatever you want. And then
Exactly.
if you do not agree, then we can still sit down and talk peacefully and civilly, and having a conversation.
Exactly.
You don't have to agree everything that you say, but it's important to let them say.
Yeah. Exactly. And this is what I believe in. I also I recognize that it's important that other people don't agree what I say. Because I don't really believe in conservation for one. Because it restricts true management. And I'm a true believer in forest management, because every forest should be considered, we need to manage it this one way or the other. Maybe the management is to leave it, but it's still tying our hands behind our back will not help us.
No.
So, but anyway, I think we went down a deep rabbit hole. But the cycle of Swedish forestry is you have your forest management plan, that is the base of your management, and that is based on the true values of what you own, not concepts.
Right.
And then let's say you have a block that's 100 years, according to your maximization calculator and the net present value, it makes the most sense to harvest it that year. You go in and harvest it. You can go harvest it within, like, that you don't have to follow it by the year, but at least it gives you a rule of thumb, like, okay, you should harvest it within this time frame because that's where you make the most money. And then you clear cut it. Most of the Swedish forestries is clear cuts. And then you start the new cycle. Most blocks, at least when I was a forester in Sweden, did site prep. So we did the tilling, the trenching, and there's tons of research, especially, I think, but the climate in Sweden really favors that. Maybe not so much everywhere in BC, but in Sweden it's beneficial to the trees, very beneficial. Like and from a net present value perspective, it makes sense because it increases your productivity with like 20% over the first 20 years. But anyway, and then you do the site prep, and then you do the planting, and most, depending on how far away you are away from the pulp mills, but most plantations are high density. So anywhere from 1,800 to 3,000.
3,000?
Well, 3,000 is pushing it, but yeah, in the high site index areas, it's on the table.
How high is high site index? 30?
Yeah, 34, I think, southern Sweden.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have 34 up here? I don't think we have 34 up in Queen Shore, dude. Is there
I thought 20 up here was good enough.
Oh yeah,
25 is they consider.
Yeah, 25 is probably very, very standard, and it's probably lower than that. Probably 20 is average in Sweden.
Yeah,
like we have the very, very, like, we're very good sites in some in southern Sweden, like where when you almost Anyway, but also northern Sweden, you have site indexes of like 12, 14, more like the Chilcotin. Yeah. So we it's a wide spectrum because Sweden is a long country.
Yeah.
And goes north south.
Right.
So we have the wide variety of site indexes and growth sites, and then you manage depending on the site index and your planting density and your distance to pulp mill sawmills. So if you're far away from a pulp mill, you're most likely going to manage that as saw logs. If you're close to pulp mills, high density, more volume, and then you can ship to the pulp mill. And then, anyway, so you do the high density. We do typically one early spacing, and now I think a lot of areas actually get spaced twice before the first thinning.
Yeah.
But spacing to just thin out the carrots, like we do it in the gardens. It's the same principle. Thin the stand out, take the low quality stems out, and let the better main stems thrive.
Using brush saws, I assume?
Yeah, brush saws.
Okay.
So actually, on an area, spacing is the most common treatment in Sweden. I think it's roughly 450,000 hectares each year is treated with brush saw spacing. And then we do that, let it grow to roughly, well, depending on the site index as well, and we have the growth curves and like commercial thinning curves as well, or commercial thinning like windows of opportunity.
Yeah.
We follow them, and then depending on the growth and site index, you have the optimum thinning windows, and then you thin it anywhere from 1 to 3 times depending on those growth curves. And most thinnings start around like between 30 and 40 years old, where I grew up anyway. And the first thinning is like purely pulp.
Right.
And then second thinning, maybe if everything goes well, you get a little bit of saw log and pulp. And then third thinning, you're getting into like a good proportion of saw logs out of that. And then that's when you start making real money. And then once it reaches its best optimum growth point, you you have it out for a clear cut, and then that's when you make your big bucks, I guess. So yeah, some areas do the fertilization after thinning as well especially in the last thinning, to get the last little growth out of the trees before you cut it down. Yeah, so it's very intensely managed.
Right.
And so that's the main difference, I think. And then we skip the bureaucracy of site plans, cruising, even layout to a degree, because it's all mapped out very, very well.
Yeah, you have a map that's precise to a couple meters, and that's really, really good.
Exactly. And then, because also you have these defined lines of where the treatment was done in the past. So most of the areas have a fairly defined line of where the younger stand starts or the older stand is. So it's that's kind of the, in a nutshell, Swedish Forestry there.
Yeah. So just sum it up, like kind of briefly. It'd be like it's private land. Yeah. Which allows you to have those multiple passes, right? Where you can come in, you can go into the same block 3 or 4 times before you actually harvest it again.
Yeah.
And make money all along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in BC, it's volume based.
Yeah.
Tenure. You know, it's that you don't typically it's public owned. You have this right to go in and harvest and manage the forest. And you get when you declare free growing, and then you give the block back to the crown, and now
that's it. It's hands off.
Yeah. So now you have to come back for those early entries of thinning that you're not making money.
Exactly.
And
it's an investment. It's a true investment. And why would you do that if you don't own the land?
Yeah, because you don't have the expectation of returns for these investments.
Exactly.
Because you.
And then that's the big thing with the obligation of BC Forestry as well. You cut an area, it's not free to grow, or it's NSR. So not suitable reforested, whatever that stands for. Something
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Anyway, you do the planting, and then if you are the obligation holder, the permit holder, you look at that and you're like, okay, how high is the bar? We should just barely make it over that bar, so we invest as little money as possible.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to let's say seed class, the most seed classes, or the most seedlings that are being planted in BC are seed class B. It's natural. And so it doesn't have any genetical enhancement in it. It might not be a good tree at all, but that's what we're planting. That's what we're using, because seed class A costs more money. And on top of that, let's say you compare it with pine and fir. Okay, Douglas fir costs close to 30% more. So would you buy just Douglas fir from the kindness of your heart?
Yeah.
No, you plant the cheapest. But if you own that land, you're like, well, you know what? I know my kids are going to walk through this forest 20 years from now. I want them to experience a Douglas fir forest. I would spend the extra money on that. So that's the difference, and it's a big difference, the ownership piece there, and how you manage forests. Because in the end of the day, it does come down to dollars and cents. And if you're the owner, you look at it more as an investment instead of checking the box for the obligation and get out of there as quick as you can. And I don't blame anybody. It's the framework of the tenure system that we've kind of found ourselves in. It worked at the time, but right now, I think we need to be innovative.
Yeah.
We need to find, maybe we rework the system we have, but something needs to be done. And the same thing, we look at the Chilcotin where I work, the amount of roads, it's crazy. Block roads everywhere. And that was another thing that blew my mind. Coming from Sweden, it's why did we build all these freaking roads? And it took me a long time to figure it out. but the appraisal system incentivizes building roads.
Yes.
So, but,
Yes.
but why doesn't it incentivize longer skidding distances? Because, like, if we want to manage our forest, that makes way more sense, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at all the forests or all the roads now on the landscape, and there's a loophole in the framework in BC. Like, okay, today you need to include it in the net area to reforest. Back then you didn't. So then it was area you didn't have to plant. It's basically cheaper, and the appraisal system incentivized you building that road, and that makes the delivered log cost cheaper. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So it's that needs to change, but it's still like that.
Yeah, I appreciate you going over the economics, because one of my favorite courses I've taken at UNBC was forest economics, and the professor at the time, Aidan Wichila, I believe he is actually in Sweden right now doing forestry. Carbon accounting, last I talked to him, was something he was looking into. But it really opened my eyes to, I had a lot of questions doing layout and stuff, that like, why these blocks, why this region, why here, why there? And at the end of the day, it all comes down to, like you said, the dollars and cents.
That's right.
And corporations who don't own the land, don't have the long-term investment. Earlier you said NPV, net present value, right? For them, the economic calculation says that there's no reason for us to do commercial thinning, fertilizer, any of that, because there's no guarantee we're going to get that money back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of people. The difference between area-based and volume-based. You see community forest, even TFLs, they're managed very differently, and it's because of that.
Yeah.
Because you have security, and it's funny now with the tariffs, but every industry needs security for investment, and BC right now is fairly unsecure. Like, I wouldn't want to dump a ton of money into a pulp mill. So
you don't have that reasonable expectation for access to fiber.
Exactly.
Right now. I do want to make a point for the area-based or any type of tenure reform. I think this topic is been talking about since our professor was a forestry student. Is basically, and in BC we have over 200 First Nation governments, and there are a lot of overlapping claims. So every time we're talking about transform a volume-based tenure to area-based tenure, it's always hard to who gets where, who gets what, and how do we settle the dispute when there's overlapping claim.
Yeah.
And so these are very unique challenges that BC is facing, and we cannot not think about that. 100%. But this new Minister of Forest, one of the mandate he got is to make more basically community forest, which I'm trying to get a hold of Community Forest Association, trying to talk to them and see what they're doing right now and how they can use this community forest. Community forest is area based, just for those that don't know, and so it's probably similar to the Swedish style, and similar to Ontario. So it's basically you have this area that you just manage, that whatever you do, you're going to pay the consequences. You're going to come back for the return. If you make an investment, you're going to get the returns. So, BC it's a very challenging place to practice professional forestry. It's hard to kind of transform volume-based to area-based just like that, because
there's tons of politics involved there.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, bureaucracy as well. But like and that's it's a very sensitive debate. But like the traditional boundaries between First Nation communities, and obviously like they were all trading, like most, like, or at least some communities were trading. There's going to be overlap, and how do we settle that? And everybody's saying, oh, the FLP is going to solve it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how my worry is we don't we don't have all the time in the world. We can't stop, because then we lose a lot of the infrastructure that's already in place. I agree that there needs to be a correction in sawmills, but all the other infrastructure is crucial for forest management.
Mm-hmm.
We are actually, I'm going to drive down to Victoria and then meet with the chief, deputy chief forester, Nora White, and then that's something I need to talk about. And then it's about the forest landscape plan.
Oh, yeah.
This is the stuff we talk about in school. Every class people talking about, even working in the industry.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I am part of the FLP development for Seidel and Kiltinkle.
No way.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't really want to get into the details of that.
Of course,
We're not gonna ask. We just want to make sure that you don't get in trouble.
No, and that's fine. Like, but the FLP thing, and then it's one of the challenges I see with it. They're trying to solve everything with the FLP, and how can we do that? We're never gonna. Like I said, I know my view on forestry differs a lot from maybe most people. Like, how can anybody agree with me fully? I don't expect anybody to do that. And it's the same with the FLP. How can we think that everybody's gonna be like holding hands and kumbaya? It's great. FLP solved everything. We're good.
That's my question for her, right? And I'm not trying to ask, like, trying to put her on a spot, but this is for any type of consensus-based decision-making process, and is when you have a fundamental disagreement.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
How do you? There are a lot of like that. Well, FERPA listed 12 values in there. Then some of them they're inherently conflicts with each other's, and these are some of the hard topics. And then that need smart people to solve this. And definitely not. Probably you, and definitely not me. You know?
Oh, look at me.
well, it's an extremely, I guess, sensitive topic, and my worry with the FLP, like I can see where it's going, and like BC Forestry is already complex. We need to tear walls down. We need to remove bureaucracy. We need to make it easier for the owners of the forest, that is the First Nation communities, to do forest management. So I'm just worried that the FLP is just going to be another layer to a very complex system already. And then, like, at what point does the forest industry in BC, like, you start adding rocks to this guy hiking? At what point does he collapse?
Yeah.
It's just I'm worried it's going to be another layer. Hopefully it's not going to be, and hopefully it's going to make everything a lot easier. But right now it's a very complex process.
Speaking of complex process, we also have the stumpage system in BC.
Yeah.
That, you know, we call it the market-based timber pricing system. The BCTS, you know, put 20% of the volume on sale, and whatever the license holder go there buy them, and that reflects the market value of the timber. And then you have, you know, different complex appraisal manual that's like 200 pages long, explain how you do your stumpage calculation through appraisal system. Is it the same thing in Sweden? Like, is it no?
No, there's no stumpage.
There's no stumpage?
No, there's no stumpage. Like, it's really, you just declare your income from logging as your capital income. It's just taxed normally. As let's say you're a forest owner, you make a ton of money clear cutting an area. You receive that money. Really, you add it. Most owners have something called a forestry, I think, forestry account, and then you can use that money for over a long period of time without being taxed on it if you use it towards the management of your forest. So basically deduct it, like the taxes, so that you use it to manage your forest the right way. So it's
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if government people that they definitely know this, but I don't know. Then why would we have stumpage then?
Well, obviously there should be stumpage, but the main revenue from forestry in BC is not from stumpage. It's from mills running, pulp mills, Atlantic Power. Did you see Atlantic Power? It's just over across the street there.
Yeah.
Drax, Caribou Pulp, like it's the industry functioning. That's where the province generate the most amount of tax, not from the stumpage. So it from my perspective, but honestly though, being the province is the owner of the forest, there should be like some if you have a beautiful forested stand right close to the mill, you're going to make a killing.
Yeah.
Cutting that and sending it to the mill.
Right.
And obviously, because it's public land, the public should get money for that, because not the person cutting it.
Yeah.
So stumpage has a place, but the stumpage system or the stumpage framework is completely broken. Well, maybe not. It's not completely broken, but now when we're changing, the industry is changing. We're kind of feeling our way into a new management kind of way. The stumpage system is very built around sawlog utilization.
Yeah.
Like now, for example, our CCR's wildfire rehab stands, like the older burnt areas, it's decaying. Man, like maybe, well, let's say, just for the sake of conversation, let's say there's even 20% sawlogs, and I'm like, it's less than that, but let's say it's 20% sawlog, and the sawlog portion is in the rot of the stem, so like inside the rot of the stem, and you have 20% sawlog. How many? So you're going through 8 trees to find the tree with a tiny bit of sawlog in it.
Yeah.
Are you going to process that?
No.
No. So like, what opportunity is there for a forest like that? Biomass and pulp. So really, there needs to be a streamlined way for forestry owners to manage that stand without being caught in the appraisal system, obligation, even stumpage. So we are doing a project right now.
Pressy Lake?
No, it's not Pressy. It's a new one.
The other one?
Yeah, it's a new one.
Oh.
So it's in burnt dead pine. And we all know the lodgepole pine come back, especially in this area, it comes back like a carpet.
Yeah.
We actually did a survey. It's close to 100,000 stems in the understory.
Post-fire.
Post-fire. But all of the trees are still standing. So like that
Sorry, why the burnt tree was still standing?
burnt trees are still standing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So and we're thinking outside of the box. And this is what I love about CCR.
Uh-huh.
It's okay. So that obviously those stands need spacing because it's coming back so dense. And we should do it as soon as possible when the trees are young, because they adapt easier when they're young. And instead of spacing it, how about we just go in there with equipment and utilize all the standing trees. And then the equipment will run some trees over, but some trees will be fine. We'll space it out just by running trees over. Because it's 100,000 on it.
It's wild.
and then we'll utilize the wood there, reduce the wildfire risk because all the burnt wood is being utilized, and it'll be a more healthy stand there than when we left it. So now we come into the stumpage and the appraisal system and that framework. So we can't log that without. So it's funny, if you go through the appraisal system, you do the cruising, all that stuff, it lands on 25 cents. And so that's good. That's the lowest you can get. it's like minus freaking, it's down there.
Yeah. Negative stumpage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're still 25 cents.
Yeah.
So even if you log a green area there, you're 25 cents. Like a healthy forest stand. But now when we're trying to do that, we're like, well, it doesn't make sense that we take on the obligation because obviously it's already free growing. And if they would have kept the max density thing on the stocking standard, if we would have taken on the obligation, we would actually been nailed for the spacing. So then we would have had to cover the cost of spacing crews going in there, cutting trees after the treatment. But anyway, so we don't want obligation because we don't want to spend the time and effort on surveying something that like it was already there before we did the treatment. And really what we're doing is we're enhancing the stand. So, okay, we don't want obligation, but then we have to pay a silviculture levy. Because that's just how it's just a basically it's a stumpage fee because we're not taking on the silviculture obligation.
Yeah.
Then we have to pay the crown so that they can manage the
Oh, you have to pay them.
Yeah, and it will be included in the stumpage. So in the end of the day, we are paying like $6 a cubic meter stumpage for something. If it would be green, it'd be 25 cents. Yeah, but like it's great because we are breaking new ground with this project, and I think we're just shining light on some of the stuff that's broken. So what we're hoping is going to come out of all this. We all work together, and we are working with pricing. We're working with the district. We're working with everybody to figure out a way forward. Like we have a ton of this like problem forests in the Chilcotin. We want to utilize the fiber because it builds wildfire risk across the landscape. Like it's extensive. Like we got oceans of dead fuel that we could utilize, but the framework is kind of working against us. But with help from FESBC as well. FESBC is a big part.
FESBC. Jason Fisher.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jason.
Yeah, and Brian Watson, we do work with him too.
Yeah.
He's kind of the main contact for me. But anyway.
Just keep saying Jason.
Well, no, and Jason, obviously, he's the big guy there, so that's good. But yeah, so we're working through it, but it's kind of mind blowing the system we're working in and how it impedes true forest management in a way. Like we just want to stick to common sense, do the right thing, manage our forests, but we find ourselves with our hands tied behind our back, and like we spend tons of money trying to plan this, making sure we check all the boxes with the system we have in place, whether it makes sense or not. And in this case, it doesn't make sense at all.
So what's the pushback? Like when you're talking to the government people, like
Well,
what kind of the feedback are they giving to you? You don't have to say if you.
No, I think they're recognizing the flaw.
Yeah.
Obviously, the government, they have a big boat to steer.
It's the hardest job.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
It's so hard.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, exactly. So they can work very slowly.
Yeah.
And in today's world, and where maybe I'm very industry focused, but in today's world and the challenges everybody's facing, we need to move fast.
Yeah.
So we can't deal with this. Like we actually lost 20 days, and this only 20 days, but 20 days of the winter operating season because of that issue, because we couldn't set stumpage, we couldn't ship, so we were sitting. So 20 days, okay, we have, let's say, 25 employees working on that site, lay them off.
Mm-hmm.
And only the tax from that would be more than what they would have gotten in stumpage because of this discussion. And on top of that, okay, we shut our operation down for 20 days. 20 days, that's 15 loads a day. Like, it's a fair amount of...
Wow.
What if? Like, I know like most mills are on the brink.
Yeah, on the brink.
No pun intended. but on the brink of curtailing.
Yeah.
Because of shortage. And then we are stumbling on ourselves because of fractions, like cents, like tiny amounts of money. Let's say we're talking about maybe $20,000, but we're gonna hold up a $5 million project for the province, and imagine the taxes that's being generated from that because of the framework we're dealing with. I'm just shooting from the hip there with those numbers, but it's like mind blowing, and that's something I think it's important for the province to recognize the challenges that everybody in the industry is facing with these small things. All of a sudden, while you've heard the little thing can tip the big thing over, and I think we need to tear walls down, make the management of forest easier for the forest owner. So I think, yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need all kinds of people voicing their opinions.
Yeah.
And we should allow people to do that. People shouldn't be demonized for saying stuff like that. Either because you're saying this, or people maybe from the other side saying stuff. Maybe we should protect every single tree in the province. Everybody should not be demonized.
No.
By saying this. This is their opinion. Could be wrong. Could be right. You can agree. You cannot agree.
Exactly.
But we should not. As soon as you're talking anything, advocating for industry, you're a, we call those people. Well, we don't call. Well, we got called. Like the greedy timber pick, right?
Yeah,
we just all we chase is the dollar bills, the volume,
yeah,
and then the other side is the tree huggers. Like this
yeah, exactly. And it's like almost it becomes an identity politics, almost like I love debate, and challenge me, and we will have a sophisticated conversation. But in today's day and age, it's like either it's shut down forestry or like forestry is we're getting pushed into a corner.
Very defensive position that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of professional foresters that I talk to, a lot of them care.
Yeah.
A lot of them want what you want. But again, their hands are tied by policy and also by economics. Right?
Yep.
And so, again, we don't get in this job. At least myself, I can only speak for myself, but I think most of us don't get in this job. Like, we're not here because we want to go cut forests down. That's not why we're here. We want to see that it's done responsibly.
Yep.
Right? That's why I got into it. It's, how can I sit back and point at an industry and say, you guys are doing it all wrong?
Yeah.
If I don't understand the industry and if I'm not in there trying to be the one who's trying to be helpful and find solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And I want to cut stuff down. I want to cut trees down if it's done for the right reason too.
For the right reasons and not just for the sake of money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it could be money. Let's say, okay, I work for the communities, like I say.
Yeah.
Let's say we have this big block. If we clear cut it, we can make a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
We can use that money to build a community center in this community. We can use the logs to build a log home for that family. Like, we need to tie real values to what we're doing and weigh the good with the bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a silver bullet. Some areas need to be conserved. In some areas, you make the decision to cut it down because the benefit of doing that overweighs the negatives. So it's always a balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you walk the line. You try to make the right decision. Like, if you look in my office, I got tons of pictures of my kids. If I make a tough decision, I'll look at them. It's like, okay, does this make sense for their future? If it does, fuck it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
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 Forestry, there's a really famous poll in forestry is forestry is not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's harder than that.
Yeah.
It's really complex.
Yeah, it is.
You could get away doing just simple forestry, just go out there and then, yeehaw, cowboy, cut down everything.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it in the right way, it's extremely difficult.
It is difficult. And you need to make compensations, and like you compensate and compensate and compensate, like not your values, but you always
Check balance.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like I do this over here, but I did that over there. It's like we CCR, for example, great example. We do road rehabilitation. We're trying to rehab a ton of those roads that I said, why are we incentivizing road building? CCR, we're recognizing the problem. We're trying to rehab these roads to make them into a forest again. Because honestly, like there's so many roads, and the area of roads is mind blowing. If you put all the roads together, it's the biggest clear cut you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. But we're also building roads because we need roads to do the other management. You weigh the two. It's like, okay, we removed 20 kilometers of road, but we built 10 kilometers of road over there. Okay, well, it was worth it. And then you look at it from that perspective, and then it becomes true management. You weigh the good with the bad. You're making the decision to keep families, communities healthy. And that's why I like working in my job, although I got a freaking pretty tough job. I'm not gonna lie. but I can look at myself in the mirror and saying I'm doing the right thing for the communities I work for, and that's a value I hold pretty close to my heart. Because like I said, my background, small community, northern Sweden, forestry is what made that possible. I want to make it possible for the communities here too. And it is possible. And we can do good forest management while still having that. It's just that we haven't really experienced it in BC yet. We're changing. But and Sweden did change a lot over the 50s, 70s. Like the pulp mills in Sweden, the mega pulp mills, like I said, and that's why I was saying like Greenpeace had it was Greenpeace at the time, but they had a big role to play. So the pulp mills in Sweden, they used like pretty ugly chemicals at the time, and they had big pipes just pumping out chemicals into the coast of Bothnia, the ocean there.
Yeah.
And you know what Greenpeace did? They went there and they welded that pipe shut. So they had to shut that pulp mill down. And it sparked some really good debate. And it made all pulp mills along that coast to change for the better. And today, we really understand why Greenpeace did that. Sometimes you just gotta roll with your gut feel and do something controversial to test the boundaries of it. I'm not saying that we're doing tons of controversial stuff, but
You're doing different things.
Yeah,
You're trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to ask something?
No, I was just gonna make a joke. You're not like physically welding any any pipes shut, but metaphorically.
Yeah.
So now I want to kind of switch to CCR, kind of what this company and some of the really cool project that you did, and I learned CCR not because Jason Fisher, or at least I learned from reading the FPPC, the magazine, the newest 2025 winter version that you guys did this fantastic trial, or not a trial, like stuff never been done before. You salvaged a post-harvest forest that was burned in 2017.
Yeah.
That was almost 10 years ago. So let me just start with CCR and so CCR is focused on large-scale forest rehabilitation, right? That's the main theme of the company.
Yeah.
So like I wrote that last night. So what makes CCR's approach different from traditional forestry operation in BC?
Well, I think I'll give you some background again to do this Chilcotin.
Yeah.
So the 3 communities that I work for, again, they're based in the Chilcotin. That area have been experiencing like crazy natural devastation. We had the mountain pine beetle, we had the fire of 2017. Like we are talking millions of millions of hectares.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So millions of cubic meters for sure. So the communities of CCR came together, and they're like, man, we got to do something.
Right.
Exactly. And like there's tons of salvage happening too. And this is another thing when it comes to stumpage and all that. There's somebody in the I guess FSP or guidance documents that labeled 30% dead forests as dead. So it's 70% green. Is that a dead forest? And everybody in BC, like mostly sawmills, are well, I'm guilty too of it because I did some of the layout, but I remember it like you find the anchor of 30% dead.
Yeah.
And then you wrap the other 70.
Yeah.
So lots of that have happened in the Chilcotin. But then the areas that never had any economic value, they're still left out there. And it's ugly looking dead pine stands. And the region that's coming up is so hit by dwarf mistletoe that it's at a stagnant state. So the only way to really do anything with that is to knock it down, restart it.
Yeah.
And bring in a healthy, I guess, tree that could grow there. And we've done some of that. And now the fires happened in 2017. We're trying to get ahead of fire, wildfire risk reduction. We're doing tons of wildfire risk reduction. And we're trying to salvage some of the dead trees that the fire hit. Because most of the saw logs or sawmills, they only have a window of opportunity to salvage fire-killed trees like within a year or 2 after the fire. And that only applies to Douglas fir because of the bark. Because sawmill doesn't accept shard fiber. So once it goes through the bark, it's a reject. They don't want it. So all the other areas that have this, like pine, spruce, killed in fire, tons of that in the Chilcotin.
Mm-hmm.
Left. There's an ocean of it. We're talking about timber supply challenges. Yes, for saw logs, but not for fiber, because there's so much dead.
Yeah.
And I know this is controversial as well, but we CCR does tons of planting to reforest these areas. But some areas, we remove the fiber, the dead fiber, before we plant it. And I know like there's an ongoing debate, and I respect that, between whether you should plant it only or harvest it as well. But if you look at it from a scale, like we briefly touched on this when you guys walked in the door, but these the Chilcotin Plateau fire just touched 1 million hectares.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we would go full tilt on it for the next 10 years, we would just, like from a harvesting perspective, we would just scratch the surface of it.
Right.
Isn't it better that we keep people working in a dead stand and we get that fiber to pulp mills, bioenergy plants, tracks, keep all those facilities running, keeping all that employment and circular economy within the region going, instead of leaving the 1 million hectares. It's kind of crazy when you think about the scale of CCR. I was actually measuring it the other day, but it's 4 million hectares. The caretaker area of CCR is it's just under 4 million hectares.
Entire BC is 100 million.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know.
4 out of 100. Forest, let's say 50. That's give and take.
Yeah.
So 4 out of 50, that's a quite a bit. That's almost like what? I can't do math right now. Like what? A tenth of the forest area in BC?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of area.
That's a lot of area.
Yeah.
I was looking at the area of Sweden too before this podcast. And it's like, I think it was 28 million hectares that's forested in Sweden. So I'm like, okay, we are within this tight team or group of people that manages CCR. We're managing 15% of Sweden within like the 20 people that we have.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. And it just, the scale of it is also what makes it pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm not sure. I probably went down a pretty deep rabbit hole there too, but
No, I liked it.
yeah.
Well, since we're here now, let me just put on my environmentalist hats. Okay, I'm just gonna bring up, not trying to challenge you or anything, but more like bring up some
No,
voices
you're more than welcome to challenge.
from. I don't want to be like a little. I don't want to create. Like, I don't want.
Let's just play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying this.
but this is some of the opinions from academia, from the conservation groups,
Yep.
environmentalists, however you want to call it. So we got criticism, or the forestry community, we got criticism for not respecting like the natural process of this ecosystem, which is with disturbance and death, and forest fire it's a big one, right?
Yeah.
And so, death is a major driver for the forest ecosystem. That's how forests naturally go through succession.
Yeah.
And the fire blocks that create habitat for beetles, which attracts, woodpeckers and all those critters, and then start, and then that the whole succession start from there, right?
Yep.
So we got this criticism is whether we should even go into salvage those burned area, because why don't we just leave them? That nature does its thing, keep it natural, however you want to define that term, and just leave them alone. Let the nature do their thing. Those natural young forests, we don't have a lot of them on our landscape.
So
and
no, and I respect that comment, but I very much disagree in the current state of forests we have in BC. Because it's one thing, if you look historically and the presence of fire, it's been small reoccurring fires or historically. But right now we're dealing with something, it's a new thing, the mega wildfires that they go across the landscape, kill everything, 100% mortality. It's big, like the Chilcotin Plateau, 1 million hectares. So we're not talking little fires here and there. I could agree with leaving those for nature, but like we have oceans of fire killed areas, and it's like, okay, one glass of wine. I said this one glass of wine is good for you per day. Okay, well, I think if you're having 10 bottles a day, you're probably don't feel that good. So it's moderation is good, but to some degree, like to some point, it's like we've crossed that line. Like, and then we're still doing the harvesting. Like we're still shipping, like not CCR, but you see log trucks coming to sawmills. Like we're still cutting green wood. Isn't it better that we harvest the dead? In my opinion, it is, because also like I said, we can't keep up with the fires we have today. We can put all the efforts into it, but we can't get ahead of it. And then the only way to get ahead of it is really to work with industry too. Like we're talking about wildfire risk reduction in across the province. Well, I'm kind of turning into that, but anyway, that's my take on it. The scale we're having today, you need to weigh the good with the bad. Mega wildfires is a new thing. Let's reassess. Yeah.
So, I got caught in one of the wildfire back in 2023. got caught in the middle of the fire. I was trying to evacuate, and then we end up have to get heli out that day, just because the fire. You can see them on Sentinel Playground. It's a big fire,
Yeah.
The Big Creek Fire in Mackenzie in 2023.
That's awesome. Like, it's probably a really cool experience.
It was cool to say right now. Like, people say I have like lots of like street credits
Yeah.
to say that, but at the moment, because
Yeah.
I was like running a crew with 3 trucks, 5 people, like I thought like, so my passenger opened up the door. There was a blowdown. We're trying to pass this fire, right? But my passenger opened up the door there's a suspend blowdown, trying to cut it. As soon as he opened the door, I just felt this heat wave punch me in the face. And then he stood out there for like 5 seconds. Eyes were red and skin were like, I don't want to say burnt, was pretty burnt.
Oh, no.
Not burnt, but like just red. Right?
Yeah.
And ashes falling down to rank 5 fires on both sides on the hill. And we have to turn around. It's a narrow forestry road, so we have to like do turn around and get out of there. It was a pretty horrible moment at that time. Right now it's super cool. I'm sitting here, oh yeah, I live to tell, but like it was a pretty terrifying moment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I would just ask you, so, you know, everybody's talking about fuel management or fire mitigation. This is the theme of the forest management right now. So in your opinions, what is the biggest gap in BC wildfire prevention policy, and, you know, and how can industry and government address them and work together, you know, to solve this problem, or First Nation and just all the communities?
So I think the biggest challenge, we're seeing tons of initiatives when it comes to wildfire risk reduction.
Yeah.
But it's the scale of it, and the pace wildfires are going currently. Like, I'm not sure how many, close to probably 1.5 million hectares that's burnt in Caribou region alone in the last 10 years. And how many hectares did we treat for wildfire risk reduction? A fraction.
Right.
I said this before with forest management too, but when it comes to wildfire risk reduction, we really need to align ourselves with industry, and industry needs to align with the management. Otherwise, we will never address the wildfire risk on the scale it's needed. And then we will never get ahead of it. Nature will deal with it. But then the issue too, like we're facing, is that even the burnt areas are prone to burn again.
To reburn.
Because it with the mountain pine beetle, it creates 2 layers. You have the blowdown of dead on the surface. But then the fire kills everything, all the live trees, and then those will burn and create wildfire fuel for the next fire. So we're kind of in a bit of a vicious cycle right now with fires in our area, and I think the only way to manage that is to do it on a proper scale, and that is large scale. Does that make sense? I think
that do make sense. And then I'm also thinking about, if you want to think about the biodiversity perspectives, right? Think about because if we don't want to salvage those forests, let's say for the sake of biodiversity,
Yep.
then, you know, this doesn't happen to everywhere. But if, let's say, a block got burned, severely burned, and then reburn again, I don't know if people have been to those areas. It's just the land of nothing.
Yeah.
And then you have a soil with this hydrophobic layer on top, so water doesn't even penetrate, and that creates runoff and all those. And you know, if you really think from that perspective, what kind of habitat does those reburn area provide? I'm not sure. I don't know. We're also trying to talk to Phil Burton from UNBC as well, Dr. Phil Burton. He's kind of like a fire ecologist at UNBC. And these are some of the topics I want to ask him when I get this heart to him.
And that's awesome. And like CCR, we have our large scale planting program for areas exactly like that are burning very intensely. The seeds in the ground are torched. There's nothing left.
Nothing.
Basically mineral soil.
Yeah.
We have I would say a fairly aggressive planting program to rehab areas exactly like that.
So you planting, is it lodgepole pine or it depends? Douglas fir?
Depends on the site, but
Right.
mostly Douglas fir, because it's natural to that area.
Yeah.
So it's mostly Douglas fir that doesn't come back naturally, because Douglas fir doesn't have the same strategy as lodgepole pine. Lodgepole pine regenerates after fire. Douglas fir is meant to withstand reoccurring fire. But then, because we've created this dense, multi-layer stand structure, the fire just carries from ladder effect, everything burns. And then it burns really intensely. There's nothing on the surface soil,
Yeah.
no seed. Those are the areas we plant. So we have a pretty large scale survey program as well.
Yeah. I've read like there's a huge landslide last year, right, in Chilcotin.
Chilcotin River, yeah.
Yeah, the people that's burnt area. That's
Yeah.
the entire hill was burned, and then that whole thing went down.
Yeah.
I was working in the bush at that time, and every time I get a patch service, it's okay. Is the water high enough is the dam filled yet or not? But
Yeah.
isn't that because I'm not sure. This is just me reading some stuff online. That's because of the burnt area, because that water, you don't have that root system, everything's failing, you don't have the roots that's kind of secure the integrity of the soil, and then now on the slope and along with the water runoff, now the whole thing just failed at some point.
Exactly. Like you have the roots in the soil, and then we're 9 years post fire right now. Those roots are really decomposing. It's losing its structural integrity. You get erosion, like you get more than you expect. I expect like Rudy Johnson Bridge here, that whole hillside burnt. I'm actually surprised it hasn't collapsed yet into the Fraser. But to that point though, it's also somewhat natural. Like Percy, you met by my office there. I forget the Chilcotin name for the Chilcotin River, but really, if you translate it, direct translate, it's like the river of landslides. So it is a natural event for that river. Cool. Although it's pretty, like, nature is pretty scary sometimes, but yeah.
It's not always la la land out there. It's not always
it's not
peaceful and lovely. I do have a couple other questions and kind of wrap up right here. So how can sawmill, pulp mill, pellet mill do a better job adapt to potential higher volumes coming from burn blocks? Because it sounds like that's the theme, at least in the near future.
Yeah, and I think I actually had to think about this for a little bit, but better screening and sorting at the mill. Because one of the main challenges with utilizing any of this fiber is the char content. Mm-hmm. And like the quality of the fiber, and if you have screening, if you have proper screening, you have sorting facilities or even automated sorting, you could go a long way. I think we do a lot of sorting, just CCR, and obviously we do meet the quality spec, but we put a lot of effort into it. I think to facilitate more the utilization of this type of fiber, I think if that's done more by the facilities, it would help us a lot.
Good to know. If you can change one thing about BC forest management policy today, you are the Minister of Forest. What will be the first policy that you will come up?
Okay, I'm going to say something controversial.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Like area-based and CCR. BC's area-based, CCR owns it.
That's going to be like clickbait videos.
Yeah. but
give all the management power to me, and I will do it right. Yeah.
King of the forest.
Exactly. No, so, but I like area-based. I get the right ownership structure in place. I think that would go a long ways.
Any message for students at UNBC Forestry that's not on the outline, but this is something I'm just thinking of right now. You can anything you want to say to people learning forest ecology management at UNBC?
Did you guys graduate this year?
We graduated.
We will be graduating.
Oh, you're pretty far gone then, but otherwise, go to mining. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's
never too late.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. What should I say there? I think we are experiencing change right now, and that's like everybody is saying, "Oh, there's no fiber." As a forester, it can give you the feeling that the floor is kind of falling from underneath your feet. So, but we, as foresters, have the opportunity to be part of that change and also embrace that change. And with change comes opportunity. So I think there will be a big change. And if you're a smart, hardworking forester, there will be a bright future for you. That's what I'm thinking. And then another thing, like, okay, now I'm gonna, but 3D printing.
Yeah.
Why isn't there 3D printing with forest fiber?
Like using like forest.
Yeah.
Interesting, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm like, now it's just.
Is that a thing? Is there people doing that right now? He's
No,
asking for,
no,
okay.
no. I don't think if it is. But why isn't there? Like, how can we build that technology? Because that would just fucking. Oh, I dropped the F1. But that would be something else.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what I think. With change comes opportunity. All the students of UNBC, if you're hardworking, passionate, whether you agree with me or not, just go with what you believe in, and you'll be successful.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Do you have any other questions?
No, I think you've given us a lot of good insight. I think talking about investing into the pulp industry, it sounds like, again, it's something I haven't personally considered. But in dealing with, I feel like, and to me, some of the fire mitigation work doesn't get done because it doesn't make dollars and cents. It's, if we do it here, we might avoid a fire and we might avoid millions of dollars in that. However, that's a maybe when we know if we do this, we will see money. So we're just going to go this way, right?
Yeah.
I think it almost sounds like having a better pulp industry could also service, fire mitigation and some of that other
100%.
some of that other work as well. So I think that's just the big takeaway for me, at least, from talking with you, and a different perspective I haven't thought about. So that's very interesting.
And that's if you should take anything home, I think that is one of the key points that I want to share. Like, and we're seeing this now in some of the forecasts. They predict a huge gap because they tie the pulp supply with the saw log logging. So they predict the gap of supply versus demand in pulp. So where's that demand going to come, or where's that supply going to come from? There's a huge opportunity to fill that demand with wildfire risk reduction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something can get benefit each other's.
Yeah,
You can do fire mitigation and benefit the pulp industry.
Yeah, align industry with the management, and all of a sudden you're doing it on a fairly large scale.
Great. Is there anything else you would like to cover today? Anything else you want to say to anybody? Anything that's something you want to get off your chest? Anything? Doesn't matter if it's controversial or whatever.
Well, no, I think I've covered a lot of topics. I feel like hopefully you can extract some good information out of it, and then obviously, like I said, I'm really excited to be part of this podcast.
I appreciate that.
Both of you have been great at interviewing me. Like, the conversation just flows like it's nothing. So it's fun. I've really enjoyed this 2 hours. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up, and then this guy has an old lady at home waiting for him to go back. So I just really want to appreciate you. Thank you for coming, spending time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks
we learned a lot, and this is really interesting. And normally I would thank C4 Radio for providing a place for us to record, but today I want to thank CCR to provide this place, and then probably show some of this really cool office in Williams Lake. This is a really fascinating place. So this wraps up this episode of the podcast, and I want to thank you for tuning in and spending time listening to us chit chat about nature, BC Forestry, and life at UNBC. And UNBC Forestry Club Podcast is a student-led podcast sponsored by absolutely nobody but a bunch of students who are passionate about forestry, the outdoors, and adventures. So new episodes drop every week, hopefully, at least. Hopefully. So stay tuned for more insightful conversation and inspiring stories. So until next time, let's continue to grow together, rooted in our love for the forest. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate this. Yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.